Columbiad and its journey to the moon. Reading Buzz.
The president of the Gun Club had credited the Observatory of Cambridge with the necessary sums for the construction of a gigantic optical instrument for viewing the surface of the moon. Regarding the choice of locality for the proposed launch, that matter was promptly determined. The object was to select some lofty mountain, and they determined that both telescope and Columbiad should be erected on the summit of Long's Peak in the Rocky Mountains. Neither pen nor language can describe the difficulties of all kinds which the American engineers had to surmount. They had to raise enormous stones, massive pieces of wrought iron, heavy corner clamps and huge portions of cylinder, with an object glass weighing nearly 30,000 pounds above the line of perpetual snow for more than 10,000 feet in height, after crossing desert prairies, impenetrable forests, fearful rapids, far from all centers of population. And yet, notwithstanding these innumerable obstacles, American genius triumphed. It had cost $400,000. The first time it was directed towards the moon, the observers evinced both curiosity and anxiety. Would they perceive people, herds of lunar animals, towns, lakes, seas? No, there was nothing which science had not already discovered. It was the 22nd of November. The departure was to take place in 10 days. One operation alone remained to be accomplished, an operation delicate and perilous, requiring infinite precautions. It was, in fact, nothing less than the loading of the Columbiad and the introduction into it of 400,000 pounds of gun cotton. Nicole had thought, not perhaps without reason, that the handling of such formidable quantities of pyroxyle would in all probability involve a grave catastrophe. Barbicane was very careful as to the transportation of the gun cotton to Stones Hill. He had it conveyed in small quantities, carefully packed in sealed cases. These were brought by rail from Tampa Town to the camp, and from thence were taken to the Columbiad by barefooted workmen, who deposit them in their places by means of cranes placed at the orifice of the cannon. No steam engine was permitted to work, and every fire was extinguished within 2 miles of the works. At last, Providence being propitious, this wonderful loading came to a happy termination. It remained now to introduce the projectile into the Columbiad and to place it on its soft bed of gun cotton. But before doing this, all those things necessary for the journey had to be carefully arranged in the projectile vehicle. The travelers, being desirous of examining the moon carefully in order to facilitate their studies, took with them Bouyer and Moller's excellent Mappa Selenographica, which they hoped would enable them to identify those physical features in the moon with which they were acquainted. They took also 3 rifles and 3 fowling pieces and a large quantity of balls, shot and powder. These defensive weapons were accompanied by pickaxes, crowbars, saws, and other useful implements, not to mention clothing adapted to every temperature. Auden wished to convey a number of animals of different sorts. After a prolonged discussion, it was agreed that the travelers should restrict themselves to a sporting dog belonging to Nicole and to a large Newfoundland. Several packets of seeds were also included among the necessaries. Michael Auden, indeed, was anxious to add some sacks full of earth to sow them in. The important question of provisions still remained. These consisted of preserved meats and vegetables, reduced by strong hydraulic pressure to the smallest possible dimensions, and water enough for 2 months, being confident from astronomical observations that there was no lack of water on the moon's surface. The 1st of December was the fatal day, for if the projectile were not discharged that very night at 10 hours 48 minutes 40 seconds p.m., more than 18 years must roll by before the moon would again present herself under the same conditions of zenith and perigee. The weather was magnificent. Despite the approach of winter, the sun shone brightly. After dawn, an innumerable multitude covered the prairie. Every quarter of an hour, the railway brought fresh accessions of sightseers, and according to the Tampa Town Observer, not less than 5 million spectators thronged the soil of Florida. Up till nightfall, a dull, noiseless agitation, such as precedes great catastrophes, ran through the anxious multitude. However, about 7 o'clock, the moon rose above the horizon. Millions of hurrahs hailed her appearance. At this moment, the three intrepid travelers appeared. Instantly, the vast assemblage, as with one accord, struck up the national hymn of the United States and Yankee Doodle. The Frenchmen and the two Americans had by this time entered the enclosure reserved in the center of the multitude. They were accompanied by the members of the gun club. Barbicane, cool and collected, was giving his final directions. Nicole, with compressed lips, his arms crossed behind his back, walked with a firm and measured step. Michel Arden, always easy, was full of inexhaustible gaiety, laughing, joking. 10 o'clock struck. The moment had arrived for taking their places in the projectile. The moment had arrived for saying goodbye. The scene was a touching one. Despite his feverish gaiety, even Michel Arden was touched. A few moments later, the three fellow travelers had ensconced themselves in the projectile and screwed down the plate which covered the entrance aperture. The mouth of the Columbiad, now completely disencumbered, was open entirely to the sky. The moon advanced upwards in a heaven of the purest clearness. A terrible silence weighed upon the entire scene. Not a breath of wind upon the earth. Not a sound of breathing from the countless chests of the spectators. All eyes were fixed upon the yawning mouth of the Columbiad. Murchison followed with his eye the hand of his chronometer. It wanted scarce 40 seconds to the moment of departure, but each second seemed to last an age. At the 20th, there was a general shudder, as it occurred to the minds of that vast assemblage that the bold travelers shut up within the projectile were also counting those terrible seconds. 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. An appalling, unearthly report followed instantly. No words can convey the slightest idea of the terrific sound. An immense spout of fire shot up from the bowels of the earth as from a crater. The glare of flame lit up the whole of Florida, and for a moment day superseded night. This immense canopy of fire was perceived at a distance of 100 miles out at sea. The discharge of the Columbiad was accompanied by a perfect earthquake. The gases of the powder, expanded by heat, forced back the atmospheric strata with tremendous violence, and this artificial hurricane rushed like a water spout through the air. Not a single spectator remained on his feet. Men, women, children, all lay prostrate like ears of corn under a tempest. There ensued a terrible tumult. A large number of persons were seriously injured. As soon as the first effects were over, the injured, the deaf, and lastly, the crowd in general, woke up with frenzied cries. Hurrah for Arden! Hurrah for Barbicane! Hurrah for Nicole! The weather, hitherto so fine, suddenly changed. The sky became heavy with clouds. On the morrow, the horizon was covered with clouds, a thick and impenetrable curtain between earth and sky, which unhappily extended as far as the Rocky Mountains. It was a fatality, but since man had chosen so to disturb the atmosphere, he was bound to accept the consequences of his experiment.